Imagine waking up one morning, checking your bank account, and seeing an extra $2,000 sitting there. No warning, no explanation, just real money. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly why Americans all over the country are buzzing right now about possible IRS and federal payments landing in January 2026. Some people are calling it a stimulus check. Others are calling it tax relief. And a whole lot of folks are confused about what's real and what's straight-up internet hype. Here's the deal. Whenever the government and the IRS are mentioned in the same sentence as payments, people pay attention, and for good reason. With prices still through the roof, credit cards maxed out, and paychecks barely keeping up, even the idea of a $2,000 check feels like a lifeline. But let me stop you right there, because not everything you're hearing online is accurate. Some claims are exaggerated, some are misunderstood, and some are actually tied to real federal programs, tax credits, and policy discussions that could impact millions of Americans in 2026. In this video, we're cutting through the noise. No fear-mongering, no fake promises. Just straight facts explained the American way. Simple, clear, and honest. We're talking about what the federal government is actually doing, how the IRS fits into this picture, who could realistically see money, and what you should be watching closely as January 2026 approaches. Because missing the details could mean missing out. If you want the truth before the headlines explode and social media loses its mind, you're in the right spot. And real quick, hit that like button so this info reaches more Americans who need it. Now let's slow this down and really unpack what's going on, because when people hear $2,000 stimulus check and January 2026 in the same sentence, emotions kick in fast. Hope, stress, excitement, skepticism, all of it. And honestly, that reaction makes sense. Over the last few years, Americans have seen emergency payments come out of nowhere, tax credits quietly expand, and refund rules change without much warning. So the idea that another payment could be coming doesn't sound impossible. But here's where things get tricky, and this is where a lot of creators mess it up. There is a big difference between a guaranteed stimulus check and potential federal payments that come through the tax system, credits, refunds, or policy-driven relief programs. Right now, there is no officially signed law that guarantees every American a brand new, standalone $2,000 stimulus check in January 2026. That part matters, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. But, and this is the part most headlines leave out, that does not mean money isn't moving through the system, or that Americans won't see significant payments tied to IRS processes. Historically, when you hear dates like January attached to IRS payments, it's usually connected to tax-related mechanisms. Refund timing changes, refundable credits, delayed payments from prior tax years, corrections, recalculations, or newly implemented benefits often start flowing right at the beginning of a calendar year. One reason January 2026 keeps popping up is because it aligns with a new tax year, potential policy rollouts, and IRS system resets. The federal government doesn't just randomly pick dates. Programs that involve income thresholds, benefit eligibility, or household data almost always hinge on tax year transitions. That's why so many Americans who received past stimulus-style payments actually saw them labeled as tax credits or advance payments rather than simple checks. It's boring language, sure, but it's how the money actually moves. Another thing fueling this conversation is the growing pressure on lawmakers. Inflation may not dominate headlines the way it used to, but everyday Americans still feel it. Rent hasn't magically dropped. Grocery bills are still painful. Medical costs, insurance premiums, and interest rates are squeezing people from every direction. When enough voters feel that pressure at the same time, Washington listens, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly. Relief doesn't always come in the form of a flashy stimulus announcement. Sometimes it shows up buried inside tax code changes, expanded credits, or revised payment thresholds that only get attention months later. This is where the IRS becomes central to the conversation. The IRS isn't just about collecting taxes. It's also the primary agency responsible for distributing federal money to individuals. That includes refunds, credits, rebates, and corrective payments. If any form of broad-based financial relief happens in early 2026, chances are extremely high that the IRS would be the delivery system. That's why people keep connecting IRS payments with a possible $2,000 figure. It's not random, it's pattern recognition based on how previous programs worked. Now, let's talk about the $2,000 number itself. That figure didn't appear out of thin air. In past relief efforts, $200, $400, and $2,000 amounts were floated, debated, promised, or partially delivered, depending on income level and household size. Over time, that number has kind of become symbolic. When people say $2,000 stimulus, what they often really mean is meaningful federal financial relief. It's shorthand, not always a literal check for that exact amount. What is realistic is that certain Americans could see payments that add up to or approach that figure depending on their situation. Tax refunds combined with refundable credits can absolutely reach that range, especially for households with dependents, lower to middle incomes, or eligibility for specific programs. And those payments often start arriving in, you guessed it, January, once filing season opens or early processing begins. This is why staying informed matters so much. People who understand how these systems work are almost always better positioned to receive money on time. They file correctly, they update their information, they don't ignore IRS notices, and they don't fall for scams promising guaranteed checks that don't exist. On the flip side, misinformation spreads fast, especially on social media. One viral post can convince thousands of people that money is coming no matter what, and that's how disappointment and sometimes financial mistakes happen. Another key factor heading into 2026 is how federal budgets are structured. Payments don't just appear because people want them. They require authorization, funding, and administrative planning. Sometimes that happens through major legislation. Other times it happens through smaller adjustments that barely make the news. That's why you'll often see official confirmation lag behind online speculation. By the time a payment is publicly announced, the groundwork has usually been in place for months. So what should Americans actually be paying attention to right now? First, IRS announcements and official guidance matter more than viral headlines. Second, eligibility rules matter. Income limits, filing status, dependence, and benefit participation all play a role. And third, timing matters. Even when money is approved, it rarely hits everyone's account on the same day. Payments roll out in waves, which is why one person might swear they got paid while another thinks nothing is happening. There's also a psychological side to all of this that doesn't get talked about enough. Financial stress makes people desperate for certainty. When you're stretched thin, you want clear yes or no answers. Unfortunately, government programs rarely work that way. They live in the gray area, full of conditions and timelines. That doesn't mean help isn't coming. It just means patience and accurate information are critical. As January 2026 approaches, conversations like this will only get louder. Media outlets will start publishing predictions. Creators will start throwing out big numbers. Some will chase clicks instead of facts. That's why this channel focuses on breaking things down calmly, clearly, and honestly. No false promises, no panic, just real talk about how the system actually works and what signs to watch for. If any broad federal payment does move forward, there will be official confirmation. There will be documentation. There will be eligibility guidelines, and there will be a clear role for the IRS in delivering that money. Until then, the smartest move is staying informed, keeping your records up to date, and understanding that financial relief doesn't always look like a single check labeled stimulus. Now let's bring this home. The idea of a $2,000 stimulus check in January 2026 isn't confirmed, but the conversation itself isn't meaningless either. It reflects real economic pressure, real policy discussions, and real mechanisms that have delivered money to Americans before. The key is separating hope from hype and facts from fiction. When you do that, you're no longer reacting emotionally. You're making informed decisions. And that's exactly what this channel is about. If you want updates that don't insult your intelligence, explanations that actually make sense, and coverage that respects your time and your wallet, you're in the right place. Things are moving, policies evolve, and staying ahead of the curve can make a real difference. So stay locked in, Keep asking smart questions, and don't let misinformation run your finances. And if this breakdown helped you even a little bit, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to push real information to real Americans who need it. As we move deeper into this conversation, it's important to
It belongs to
understand why so
everyone
many
gathered
Americans
here
feel
today
like they're
and
constantly
everyone
playing catch-up
watching
financially,
all across
even when they're
America.
doing everything right. You work, you file your taxes, you follow the rules, and yet it still feels like the system is always one step ahead of you. That's why the idea of a federal payment, whether it's labeled a stimulus check, a refund boost, or a tax credit, hits such a nerve. It represents breathing room. And breathing room is something a lot of people haven't had in a long time. One thing that rarely gets explained clearly is how quietly the IRS operates when it comes to payments. Big stimulus checks make headlines, but smaller, equally impactful payments often don't. Adjustments to withholding rules, expanded refundable credits, retroactive corrections, and recalculated benefits can result in thousands of dollars moving into people's accounts without ever being branded as stimulus. That's why you'll hear stories from neighbors, co-workers, or family members who suddenly receive unexpected deposits and don't even fully understand where the money came from. Another layer to this is timing. January isn't just the start of a new year, it's the reset button for the entire federal financial system. Budgets refresh, programs renew, thresholds update, and eligibility rules shift. If relief is coming in any form, that's when the gears start turning. That's also why so much speculation clusters around that month. People aren't crazy for watching it closely. They're responding to patterns they've seen before. Now let's talk about who tends to benefit most when these payments happen. Historically, middle and lower income Americans see the biggest impact. That includes retirees on fixed incomes, working families with dependents, people juggling multiple jobs, and anyone whose income puts them right on the edge of eligibility cutoffs. For these groups, even a modest payment can change an entire month or an entire year. And when payments approach figures like $2,000, the difference can be life-changing. But here's where realism matters. Not everyone will qualify, not everyone will receive the same amount, and not everyone will get paid at the same time. That's not pessimism. That's how federal programs have always worked. Understanding that upfront helps manage expectations and keeps people from making risky financial decisions based on rumors. The goal isn't blind optimism. The goal is informed readiness. Another reason this topic matters so much right now is trust. A lot of Americans don't trust the system anymore. They've seen promises made and delayed. They've seen programs announced and then quietly scaled back. That skepticism is earned. But here's the flip side. When payments do come through official channels, they're documented, traceable, and verifiable. That's why relying on IRS guidance and official federal updates is so important, even if they're slower and less flashy than social media posts. We also have to talk about scams, because whenever the word stimulus trends, scammers come out in full force. Fake texts, emails, phone calls, and social posts promise guaranteed money if you just confirm your info or act fast. The real IRS doesn't work that way. They don't slide into DMs. They don't threaten you with arrest over text, and they don't ask for payment to release money owed to you. Staying informed isn't just about getting paid, it's about staying protected. Looking ahead, what matters most is preparation, making sure your tax filings are accurate, making sure your address and bank information are current, understanding which credits and benefits you already qualify for. These small steps don't feel exciting, but they put you in the best possible position if and when payments move forward. People who are prepared almost always get paid first and with fewer issues. And let's be honest, most Americans aren't looking for handouts. They're looking for fairness. They're looking for stability. They're looking for a system that acknowledges how hard things still are for a lot of households. That's why these conversations don't go away. They resurface every time costs rise faster than wages and every time the economy feels disconnected from everyday reality. As we get closer to 2026, clarity will improve. Official announcements will replace speculation. Numbers will replace guesses. And when that happens, being informed early gives you an advantage. You won't be scrambling. You won't be confused. You'll know exactly what's happening and what steps, if any, you need to take. So here's the bottom line. A guaranteed, universal $2,000 stimulus check for January 2026 has not been officially confirmed, but the conversation exists for real reasons. Federal payments, IRS-driven relief, and tax-related benefits are very much part of the system, and they continue to evolve. Dismissing the topic entirely is just as unhelpful as blindly believing every headline. This channel exists to live in the middle ground, the space where facts matter, urgency is real, and honesty comes first. No hype, no fear, just clear explanations so you can make smart decisions with your money. If you've stuck with me this far, you're already ahead of most people. Stay alert, stay informed, and don't let misinformation steer your financial future. And if this video helped bring some clarity to a confusing topic, hit that like button. It helps this information reach more Americans who need straight answers, not empty promises.